Water was already creeping past the towel Kendra had shoved under the kitchen sink. The linoleum felt cold through her socks. And every few seconds another drop hit the cabinet floor like it was counting down for her. Her phone lit up on the counter. Rent portal warning. Shift reminder for the root desk. Then another calendar ping for her father's clinic pickup window. Kendra stood still for one breath, because if she moved too fast, she knew she would start doing everybody else's panic for them. Then she picked up her phone, took a picture of the water, checked the time, and opened her notes. Date, leak under sink. Towel soaked. Utility charge posted. Andre pickup still blocked. She was not just looking at a leak. She was looking at rent, credit, work, and family care all landing before breakfast. Kendra crouched low, angled her phone under the sink, and took photos of the wet cabinet floor, the pipe, the towel, and the thin line of water running toward the stove. In the house thread, she sent the pictures with the time and a short note saying it needed attention today. A few minutes later, she saw what he had forwarded to Warren. Just a little sink leak. That was not what she had said. Then Warren replied to Brian like Brian had been the one standing barefoot in the kitchen with the towel in his hand. Kendra looked at the screen long enough for her jaw to tighten, then set the phone down. Her details had made the problem clear. But once Brian softened them, she became the one making it sound serious. Before Kendra could even rinse her hands, Megan's name popped up with another apology. Sorry, I forgot the utility share. I'll get it to you soon. The utility draft had already gone through, and the rent portal was still flashing its warning like the house was one late click from trouble. Kendra opened her banking app and stared at the charge. Same house, smallest bedroom, and somehow her card was the cushion everybody landed on. Brian sent a casual message saying they would sort it out. Like sorting it out did not mean Kendra carrying the amount until Megan remembered again. She typed the exact share in the payment request and did not add a smiley face. The leak had water on the floor, yes. But the real damage was how normal they had made it for her money to cover their delay. The contractor window came in right across Andre's clinic pickup. Kendra stared at the calendar like moving one block might make the whole morning behave. Her dispatch shift started not long after, and Andre's appointment had already been hard to get. He answered on the second ring, voice low and careful. Baby, I can try the bus if you need me to. He knew every transfer in the city. But neuropathy did not care about pride or bus schedules. No, Daddy, I'm picking you up. She opened her calendar and locked his time in again. Then checked the repair window against her work start. The house had an emergency. So did her father's body. And for once, she let that matter first instead of treating her own family care like spare time. Brian's next text came in like he was asking her to grab paper towels. He had brewery work, so could she just handle the contractor when they came by? Kendra asked who had actually approved the visit, whether Warren had confirmed the repair, and what time somebody with lease authority would be available if the contractor needed a decision. Brian wrote back, "Can we not make this harder than it is?" Kendra stared at those words while water kept spreading under the sink. He had the lease login, the landlord's ear, and the easy tone that made people relax. She had the wet floor, the posted utility charge, her father's appointment, and the shifts she could not be late for. She opened her notes again. Kendra opened her notes and made the morning plain. Megan's share still missing. Leak photos sent. Work order number saved. She took a screenshot of the utility charge, added the split amount, then sent one clean message to the house thread. She asked who was authorizing the repair, who would be present for access, and when Megan's payment would clear. No extra softness. No worries. Megan answered with, "I'm so sorry, I really thought I sent it." Brian did not answer the authorization question. If they wanted her to keep the house moving, they were going to have to start giving her more than apologies and vague comfort. A few minutes later, Brian sent Warren a short message in the repair thread. "We got it, that was all." Warren answered him like the matter was settled, saying to keep him posted, saying she did not know the leak was that serious. Kendra looked at the read receipts lined up under her own message. Everybody had seen the dates. Everybody had seen the amount. Everybody had seen the contractor conflict. But Brian's easy tone gave them a place to rest. And her details became the thing making everyone uncomfortable. She did not raise her voice. She did not send the paragraph sitting hot in her throat. She just saved the thread, because the pattern was no longer hiding. Paula's email arrived with a subject line that sounded neat enough to be harmless. She thanked Kendra for her concern, asked that future messages stay concise and cordial, and then requested the same dates and photos Kendra had already sent. Near the bottom, Paula added that lease-facing decisions should continue through Brian, since he was the listed contact. Kendra read that sentence twice. Her memory of when the cabinet first started getting damp. But the decision still belonged to Brian's name and Brian's tone. She sat back from the screen and felt the insult settle into something colder than anger. This was not confusion. This was a chain. And every link let them use her accuracy, while keeping her outside the room where choices were made. Kendra did not send Paula another answer right away. Wiped her hands on the towel by the sink, and started saving everything. The photos went into one folder. The texts, the email, the work order number, and Brian's short little replies went into another. She checked the contractor window against her calendar and saw the same problem sitting there. Plain as a bill on the table. Her work shift was not imaginary. But she knew better. Her card, her memory, her calm, not to argue. Not yet. Just to stop letting the whole thing float around like a misunderstanding. The next morning, Kendra was at the dispatch desk with her headset on, talking a patient's daughter through a missed pickup window in the same steady voice everyone at work depended on. While she adjusted the root board, her phone buzzed beside the keyboard. The house chat wanted to know about utilities. Megan sent, "I'm sorry, I'm trying," but no payment came through. Stephanie paused behind Kendra's chair and glanced at the screen. "Everything okay?" Kendra turned the phone face down and finished the call without letting her voice change. Afterward, she wrote down who had asked for what and when. Work got one column. House got another. Money got its own. If everybody wanted her calm, they were going to get the recorded version now. Not the free one that disappeared after saving them. On break, Kendra opened her bank app and let the numbers tell the truth nobody in the house wanted to hear. The utility draft had posted. Megan's share was still missing. Gas was higher than it had been 2 days ago. The tire light had blinked on that week. And Andre had a pharmacy stop that could not wait until everybody else got organized. Kendra looked at her grocery list and started moving things around in her head. Chicken could become beans. The tire could maybe wait one more day, if it did not get worse. But Andre's medication was not a place to gamble. She wrote down what Megan owed, not rounded, not softened, not hidden under a little whenever you can. Their delay was not small just because they were comfortable calling it small. That was when Kendra stopped thinking about each problem like it stood alone. She opened the new note and made herself name the pattern. Access windows. Payment tracking. Calm explanations after somebody else forgot to do what they said they would do. She added rent portal screenshots, the timestamps from the undersync photos, and the messages where Brian sounded easy because she had already done the work. Looking at the list made her stomach tighten, but it also cleared something up. This was not just disrespect floating in the air. It was access. They had access to her money when the draft hit. Access to her time when Warren needed the door opened. Access to her memory when Brian needed facts. And none of that access had come with equal say. LaToya found her in the break room standing beside the vending machine with coffee that had gone cold. Kendra gave her the short version first, then the real version came out anyway. The leak, the utility charge, the contractor window, Andre's appointment. Brian acting relaxed while using her details. Paula turning the whole thing into tone. LaToya listened without making the face people make when they want you to calm down before they understand you. Then she asked, what do they still have access to that they haven't respected? Kendra looked down at her phone. She did not offer to jump into the thread. She just named it clean, and that helped Kendra trust what she had already seen. She was not being dramatic. Back at her desk, Kendra opened Paula's reply and read it twice. The subject line still carried the work order number, neat and official. But the message asked her to keep future notes concise and cordial. Then told her to resend the dates and photos through Brian so the lease communication could stay streamlined. Kendra stared at the attachments she had already sent, sitting right there under her own name. The leak details were not missing. She did not type what rose first in her throat. She saved the email, added it to the folder, and wrote one more line in her notes. Facts are not enough without terms. From now on, clarity had to include who was deciding, who was paying and who got to use her time. That evening, Kendra carried the trash out before the bins rolled to the curb. Beverly Carter was 2 houses down, pulling her own can into place like she had been keeping the block on schedule since before anybody else noticed there. Was a schedule. That sink acting up again? Kendra let out a tired laugh. Because yes, again. Beverly remembered the first winter Kendra had waited outside for a repair van that never stayed long enough to fix. Much. She remembered it by the cold, by the trash notices taped to the poles, by the color of the van parked crooked near the curb. Brian had been calling the leak recent. Beverly's memory did not match that. She just went back inside and added the details to her timeline. It felt good to have the truth exist somewhere besides her own phone. Before Kendra made it back inside, Andre called from his senior apartment. His voice had that careful lift in it, the one he used when he was trying not to sound like he needed anything. He said he could probably take the bus to the clinic if the house repair got complicated. Then he mentioned the pharmacy stop like it was optional. Kendra leaned against the porch rail and closed her eyes for 1 second. She also knew what his legs sounded like on a bad day. "Daddy, I've got you," she said. "That appointment stays where it is." After they hung up, she opened her calendar and blocked the clinic and pharmacy time in solid color. The contractor window went beside it as conditional, not hers by default. Her father's care was not empty space for Brian and Warren to borrow. A little later, Brian sent her a side text. He said she was really good at keeping the house straight and that he appreciated it. For half a breath, Kendra wanted to believe he meant it in a way that would matter out loud. Then the group chat lit up. Brian told everyone he was trying to keep things simple because Kendra was stressed about the details. Megan answered with a little thank you and a soft emoji, like Brian had just smoothed over a problem instead of creating one. Kendra looked at the private praise, then at the public version of her. Same phone, same minute. She took screenshots of both. She did not send a paragraph. The thread was not a place for her to earn fairness anymore. It was a record. Kendra sat down at the kitchen table and gave herself 10 minutes to write one message that did not beg, soften, or explain her mood. She included Megan's exact utility share from the payment request and the due date. She noted that the repair photos, timestamps, and work order information had already been provided. She added that Andre's clinic window was not available for contractor access. Then she asked for written confirmation of who was authorizing the repair and who would be present to let the contractor in. No extra apology. No little joke to make it easier to swallow. She sent it to Brian, Megan, Paula, and Warren in the same thread. Afterward, the kitchen felt too quiet, but Kendra did not reach for another sentence. If they wanted her help now, they had to answer the facts where everyone could see them. By the time Kendra checked the payment app again, Megan's transfer still was not there. The request sat open like it had been politely ignored. Under it, the utility draft showed pending, and her bank balance looked smaller than it should have for rent week. Then Brian texted like they had not just gone through the whole thing in writing. "Can you cover it this time? Just until Friday. It'll be easier." Kendra looked at the word easier for a long second. Easier for who? And that card was attached to her name, not the house's good intentions. She did not answer right away. She set the phone down. They had heard her terms? They just still expected her money to move first. By mid-morning, the charge was no longer pending. Rerouting 2 patient rides after a driver called in late. The notification slid across her screen with the amount, and right behind it came the clinic reminder for Andre's pickup. Megan's reimbursement still had not arrived. And Kendra put her headset back on with the same steady voice she used for everybody else's emergencies. But this time, she did not let the charge become background noise. She took a screenshot, saved the transaction, and wrote down the time it posted. This was not a harmless delay. It was her account carrying the house again while her workday, her father's appointment, and her own budget all had to keep moving. Brian tried again before lunch. "Megan gets paid Friday," he wrote. "Can we just let it ride?" Plain as day. She opened the payment app, resent Megan the exact request. Then she answered Brian without decorating it. "No, I'm not carrying her share until Friday. Going forward, my card is not used for shared drafts unless everyone's portion is confirmed in advance." She checked the card on file note and saved another screenshot. It did not feel dramatic. It felt overdue. Brian could make it sound simple, because it was not his balance taking the hit. Kendra's hand shook a little after she sent it, but she did not take it back. Megan's response came with a heart emoji and a long apology about being overwhelmed. She said she really did not mean to put Kendra in a bad spot. Before Kendra could even decide if she wanted to answer, Brian jumped in and said the house was getting stressful and everybody needed to be flexible. There it was. She looked at the screen until the first hot reply passed through her and left. Then she wrote, "The reimbursement amount is listed above. Please confirm when it's sent." Nothing about whether Megan meant well. Nothing about whether Brian felt tense. Kendra did not win the room. She knew that. But the record stayed clean, and she had not handed them the reaction they were waiting to use. At work, Stephanie noticed before Kendra could tuck the phone away. Her eyes moved from Kendra's screen to the call queue. Then back again. "I need you to leave home at home," she said, low enough that it sounded professional instead of kind. 2 minutes later, Stephanie sent her the client nobody else wanted. A man angry because his pickup window had shifted, and his dialysis ride might run late. Kendra put on the same steady voice everybody loved when it served them. She confirmed the address, called the driver, adjusted the route, and got the man a real answer instead of a script. While she worked, the house messages stayed muted. Her job could not become evidence that she was unreliable, just because other people kept treating her life like overflow. Space. Kendra caught Andre's call on her break. Standing near the back hallway where the vending machine hummed louder than the office. He tried to sound casual. He said if the house needed her for that plumber thing, he could take the bus and make the transfer by the pharmacy. Her father knew every bus route in the city, but she could hear the pain he was trying to tuck behind pride. She opened her calendar and looked at the clinic block already sitting there. None of it was extra. None of it was empty time. "No, Daddy," she said. "I'm picking you up. That time is handled." Then she marked herself unavailable for repair access during that window. The house could figure out the contractor without taking her father's care from her. So Brian had to be the point person he kept acting like he was. Kendra saw pieces of it come through in the thread while she stayed out of the way. Warren asked when the leak had first gotten worse. "Recently, I think." Brian answered like he was guessing from across the room. Then Ben asked for the photos that showed the water path. Kendra could picture the kitchen, towels bunched under the cabinet. Megan unsure what had been moved, Brian trying to sound relaxed while the questions got specific. She had the dates, she had the pictures. But she did not rush in. In the clinic parking lot, Kendra sat with Andre's paperwork tucked in the console and her phone balanced in one hand. Brian's messages had shifted from casual to urgent. Warren wanted the dates. Ben needed the photos. The house suddenly cared about the notes they had wanted her to soften. Kendra opened the repair folder but did not start attaching everything just because they were pressed. She wrote one clean reply to the shared thread. She could provide the dated photos, access notes, and work order information directly once the repair authorization. The person responsible for access and the communication chain were confirmed in writing. She added that she was unavailable during her protected clinic window. Then she set the phone down and walked around to help Andre. She was not withholding the truth. Back at the house, Ben's van pulled up to a kitchen that looked like nobody had really prepared for him. Cleaning bottles crowded the cabinet. The baseboard smelled damp, and Megan stood off to the side saying she was not sure what had been moved or when. Brian tried to answer with confidence, but most of it came out as guesses. Maybe it had been dripping longer. Maybe that panel had been wet before. Maybe Kendra had a picture somewhere. 2 houses down, Beverly noticed the repair van from her porch. She remembered Kendra waiting outside in a coat months earlier, phone in hand, making sure a different worker could get in. Nobody in that kitchen said it out loud yet, but the room showed it. The person missing from the visit was the one who had been keeping the problem from getting this messy. Ben crouched under the sink, touched the damp cabinet base, and stood with his invoice pad still blank. He told Brian he could not give a responsible estimate from guesses. He needed the first clear date, the path of the water, and the photos that showed what changed over time. On the phone, asked if Brian had those. Megan looked between them, quiet now. The person sending the dated pictures was the person who understood the problem. Without that record, he would be guessing and maybe making a second trip for no reason. For the first time, Kendra's careful notes were not being treated like stress. Brian still had the lease connection, but it could not tell anyone when the leak started or how far the water had spread. Brian's private text came in before anything else. He asked Kendra to send the whole repair folder because Ben was waiting and Warren wanted the timeline. Then, less than a minute later, Brian posted in the group thread, "Kendra, can you resend everything so we're all on the same page?" He made it sound like the delay was on her. Like the pictures and notes had not been sitting there the whole time. Megan added a little thanks with no payment behind it. Kendra looked at the read receipts and felt the heat rise in her chest. But she kept her fingers still. The same records Brian had treated like too much were now needed to move the repair forward. He just wanted them to arrive wearing his name. Kendra opened the folder, checked the labels, and decided if the information went out, it would go directly, with terms attached. Paula's email arrived with the kind of calm language that made dismissal sound like order. She thanked Kendra for her attention to detail, then asked her to send the complete repair record through Brian. The list she requested was almost funny if it had not been so insulting. Dates, photos, work order number, access notes, and any contractor comments. The authority was still being handed back to him. At the bottom, Paula added that everyone should keep communication cordial and streamlined. They needed her evidence, but wanted her to pass it through the person who had erased it, and to sound pleasant while doing it. Any next step would need direct communication, written decisions, and respect for her schedule. She was done mistaking the pattern for confusion. By the next update, Ben's estimate had turned the leak into a number Warren could not ignore. There was possible damage near the flooring edge. The note said the problem appeared to have worsened, while the approval stayed delayed and the timeline stayed unclear. Kendra read that line slowly. It was plain, technical, and not emotional at all. That made it harder for anyone to dismiss. Brian had kept saying it was probably simple. But the estimate showed what simple became when nobody wanted to answer the details. Kendra saved the estimate, then marked the part about delayed approval. No one had said she was right. But the paper now carried what she had been trying to prevent. A small leak had turned into a bigger cost, because the people with authority had not respected the person with the record. Warren's next message came fast. Since Kendra knew the house best, could she be available for another contractor window around midday? He said it like a compliment, then added that approval still needed to go through Brian. Just to keep things simple. Kendra sat with the phone in her hand and let that settle. She was trusted to open the door, explain the cabinet, point out the water path, and make sure nobody wasted a trip. But the decision still belonged somewhere else. She looked at the proposed time against her work calendar and did not answer right away. When she did, she kept it short. Who was authorizing the work? Who would be present for access? Would the decision and any changes be confirmed in writing? Warren wanted her convenience. Kendra asked for responsibility. Kendra opened her calendar and did the kind of math nobody else ever saw. The repair window cut into her root desk coverage, and Stephanie had already been watching her phone use too closely. Andre's pharmacy pickup sat later that same day, not flexible the way everybody liked to pretend her time was. Her gas was low. Megan's utility money still had not fully come back. If Kendra left work early or stretched her lunch, that would not just be a favor. It would be another piece of her life bending around a house that still would not give her a real say. She looked at the pharmacy reminder, then at the unpaid request, then back at Warren's text. The answer got clear. She was not offering another access window unless the terms protected her schedule, her money, and the record she had built. Brian went into the group chat acting like the whole thing was under control. He said nobody needed to make a big deal out of the leak, that he was handling it, that he would forward updates when he had them. Then, right after that, he texted Kendra privately and asked her to send the whole repair folder so he could pass it along to Warren. That was the part that got under her skin. Publicly, he wanted to look relaxed. Privately, he wanted the one thing he could not fake. Kendra stared at the message, then at the thread where he had already made it sound like she was overdoing it. Megan was still hovering with apologies and no money. Kendra did not send the folder to Brian in a private message. If the records were going anywhere, they were going into the shared thread where everybody could see whose work they were using. Then Paula opened a fresh email thread and made the contradiction official. She requested Kendra's complete timeline, photos, and access notes, with the work order number in the subject line. In the same message, she listed Brian as the least contact and asked everyone to keep communication cordial and streamlined. Kendra looked at the screen for a long moment. They were not confused about who had the information. They knew exactly who had been tracking the leak, the appointments, and the contractor details. They just wanted the authority to stay with Brian while the labor stayed with her. Kendra started a reply and kept her language plain. She could share information directly. Any request involving her schedule had to be stated clearly. This time her facts were not going to be treated like loose help. Kendra looked at Paula's formal thread again. It requested the same dates, pictures, work order number, and contractor notes she had already provided. She sat there for a second, then answered with the work order number, the latest estimate reference, and 4 plain questions. Who was authorizing the repair? Who was responsible for access? How reimbursement was going to work? And whether they could include her directly when her records and schedule were what everybody needed. She kept it short and left the emotion out of it. Just terms. Now the deposit was suddenly a big worry. And now she said she had not realized the leak or the late utility share was that serious. The dates were there. The amounts were there, the warnings were there too. Nothing about this was new. Megan had already been told more than once, and still the money had not shown up when it was supposed to. Kendra looked at the same thread, the same little bubbles of concern. She did not waste time trying to make Megan comfortable about it. She sent back the same facts, plain as they came. The date the bill hit, the amount still owed, and the messages where she had already asked for it. If Megan wanted to be upset now, that was her business. Kendra was done pretending surprise counted as responsibility. Beverly caught Kendra outside by the bins and gave her the kind of memory that sticks because it comes from someone who was actually paying attention. She remembered Kendra waiting on the porch during a cold week months back, watching a repair van that had come and gone with the trash day notices still stuck in the breeze. She remembered the color of the truck, the weather, the week. That was enough to anchor the timeline. Kendra listened and felt something settle in her chest. Beverly was not trying to take over, and she did not need a long explanation to believe it. Kendra saved the details into her packet, added the date markers, and kept the record close. The leak had not come out of nowhere. Ben's answer came through without any softness around it. He wrote that Kendra's dated photos and access notes showed where the water had traveled under the sink and along the flooring edge. He also added that quick approval mattered now, because repeated dampness could turn a small repair into cabinet and floor damage. Kendra read the message twice. She did not need Ben to tell her she had been right. But his words put practical weight behind what everybody had been treating like her being extra. Brian did not respond right away. Paula stayed quiet too. Warren was copied on the thread, so he could see the same thing everyone else could see now. The clearest repair map had not come from the person with the lease login. It had come from Kendra's photos, Kendra's notes, and Kendra's memory. Warren answered the thread with a thank you that sounded polite enough to pass in a hallway. He told Kendra she had been thorough, then said Brian was still the one on the lease. So if they wanted to keep the delay down, Kendra should open the house and send everything over. That was the old trick again. Praise first, then the pushback to help her. Kendra read it once, then again, because she could feel the old pull to make things easy so everybody else could stay comfortable. The part that stayed with her was not the thanks. It was the way he could admit she had the cleanest record and still root the real decision around her. If she handed over the whole packet right then, the same pattern would keep going. Just dressed up nicer. So she did not rush to send it. She sat with the message, held onto the folder, and understood exactly what the politeness was trying to cover. Kendra opened a new reply and wrote it in numbered lines so nobody could pretend the question was unclear. She would not meet another contractor window unless the person responsible for access was named in writing. She would not release the complete repair packet unless the repair approval was confirmed. The reimbursement plan was stated, and the communication chain included her directly when her records or schedule were being used. She did not say the repair should stop. She did not threaten anyone. She simply took her time, her card, and her folder out of the automatic pile. The attachment stayed right where it was. The calendar block stayed protected. Before she hit send, She read the message once more to make sure there was nothing in it for Paula to turn into attitude. Then she sent it and let the quiet after that belong to them. Brian did not take long to turn it into a house problem. In the group chat, he said Kendra was making everyone uncomfortable and that if she wanted this much control, maybe the lease situation needed to change. Megan did not answer the missing payment part. She only said she wished things could calm down. Kendra stood near the doorway of her small room with the phone in her hand and felt the old pressure move through her chest. She paid rent for that room. It was the smallest room in the house. But it was still shelter, still mail, still a bed behind a door she could close. The kitchen was still damp, the utility request was still unpaid. And Brian was acting like her request for written responsibility was a threat. She did not fire back. She let the fear pass through without handing him a reaction. Kendra took a screenshot of Brian's message before it could get softened later. Then she replied with one sentence that kept her voice out of their hands. Any proposed change to the room or lease arrangement needed to be put in writing with dates and terms. After that, she opened her private folder and updated it piece by piece. Ben's repair note, the estimate, the utility draft, Megan's unpaid balance, the access requests, Warren's wording, and Brian's lease remark. She added a note beside her calendar block and saved the latest email thread under housing. The packet still did not go out for free. The fear was real. But it was not instruction. Kendra had learned enough by then to know that panic could make a person useful again before they even noticed. She was not going back to that. By the time Kendra pulled away from Andre's clinic, the day already felt used up. He had his discharge papers folded in his lap, and her phone kept reminding her about the pharmacy stop she still had to make. Then the tire light came on. Her stomach dropped before she even looked at the gas gauge. Because the gauge was low too. Megan still hadn't sent her share of the utilities. Unpaid, like it had all the time in the world. Andre told her not to worry. She almost laughed at that. Worry was already in the car with them. She checked her balance before she pulled back into traffic. Then checked it again when she parked. There was enough to keep the week moving. Not enough to keep covering other people forever. The car was part of how she got to work and how she handled her father's rides. Now it needed care too. At work, Kendra tried to keep her phone face down between calls. But Stephanie still noticed. Kendra had checked the tire message. Then the pharmacy hours. Then the house thread. All in the little spaces where nobody was supposed to need anything from her. Stephanie stopped near her desk and said, I need you focused today. Personal issues can't start affecting dispatch reliability. Kendra looked up from the root board and said, Understood. Stephanie handed her a difficult client call because the pickup window had collapsed and the family was upset. Kendra put on the headset, muted the rest of her alerts, and handled it cleanly. She found the new route, calmed the caller, and documented the change before her break timer even hit. Stephanie wanted her steadiness when it served the company. Kendra made sure that same steadiness protected her record too. Andre caught the look on her face and finally said what he had been sitting on. He had waited to mention the medication pickup because he did not want to be one more thing on her list. That hit her harder than the tire light. She told him, gently but plain, that he was not a burden. She already had the pharmacy hours. She would handle it, and she meant it. But while he talked about managing, Kendra was doing the math behind her eyes. Gas, a tire repair. Groceries, the extra trip. Every little thing had a number attached to it. And the numbers kept adding up on her side. Andre sat there with his clinic papers folded neat in his hands, trying to take up less space. He was still trying not to cost his daughter anything. Kendra heard him, reassured him, and kept recalculating anyway. Brian and Megan came at her with the soft voices first, the kind that were supposed to make everything easier. Brian said they did not mean to make her feel unappreciated. Megan said she just wanted the house to calm down. But neither of them had money, and neither of them had anything written. What they wanted was the same thing they always wanted. Kendra's full repair packet and the next access window. So the house could keep moving without them having to carry the weight of it. She stayed in the kitchen doorway and let them talk. The smell of damp wood was still under the sink. And she could still picture the towel she had thrown down the first time the leak got bad. When they finished, she did not soften it for them. She asked again who was authorizing the repair, who was responsible for access. and when Megan's share was getting paid. If they wanted her records, they could answer her in writing first. That told Kendra enough. Later, alone in her small bedroom, Kendra sat on the edge of the bed with her bank app open and the tire estimate pulled up beside it. One screen after another, each one asking for more than she had. The unpaid utility request was still there. Brian's lease remark was still floating around in her head. Her repair folder sat in her phone like a whole second job. For a minute she thought about sending it all, just to make the house quiet again. That was the temptation. Not winning. Quiet. A few hours without texts. Without tension, without feeling like every line she drew made somebody else mad. But she knew what that quiet cost her now. It cost money. It cost sleep. It cost the right to stop being the person everybody leaned on without asking. She looked around the room she paid for and felt the loneliness of that. Then she sat with it long enough to know something else too. Being tired was not the same thing as being wrong. LaToya found Kendra in the break room with her lunch still closed and her face already tired. She slid a napkin over and wrote the tire shop address on it. Told Kendra she had a guy there who would look at the car without trying to sell her a whole new problem. She offered the ride too, but she did not push. She just opened up the next step. Then she pulled out her own phone and made a short list. Car. Money, records. That was all. No lecture. No rescue fantasy. Just the three things that actually needed attention before the house meeting got twisted into something else. When LaToya asked what Kendra was willing to close off, she meant access. What was Brian still getting from her that he had not earned? What was Megan still assuming she could delay? Support was only useful if it left her with her own choices. Beverly caught her outside and gave her more than a quick update. She said there might be a room opening with somebody careful. Somebody who actually paid attention to the house the way Kendra did. Then she said, plain as day, that if Kendra needed a witness, she would back up the repair history. She even remembered the week by the repair van and the trash day notices. The way she always did. That mattered. Beverly was not pushing her out. She was not telling her to run. She was just making sure Kendra knew Brian's lease was not the only ground in the world. Kendra took the handwritten number, asked her own questions about rent and utilities, and tucked the contact into her phone without deciding right then. That was enough. She did not need rescue. She needed options. Beverly gave her one without asking for control in return. And just like that, Brian's remark lost a little of its weight. Back in her room, Kendra opened her laptop and started pulling the whole thing together. She made one folder for the leak photos, another for the utility payments, another for the contractor notes. She added the text thread where Brian kept talking like calm tone could make facts disappear. Then she dropped Beverly's date beside the repair timeline and added the work order number, the calendar exports, and the screenshots of every time somebody had asked her to keep the house moving. Her work schedule went in too, along with Andre's clinic windows and the pharmacy stops she had been protecting all along. She even put in Brian's lease remark, the one about the lease situation changing if she wanted control. The packet looked plain when she finished. Nothing fancy. Just a clean record of who knew what, who asked for what, and who had been carrying the weight. That was the point. It had always been a record. They had just been treating it like noise. The group chat lit up while Kendra sat at the kitchen table with the packet beside her and the damp towel still on the floor by the sink. Brian said everybody needed to talk because the way she was handling things was making the house tense. Megan jumped in right after him, saying she just wanted everything to feel normal again. Nobody mentioned the unpaid utility share. Nobody mentioned the written terms Kendra had asked for. Kendra read it once, then let the screen go dark. She had fought that battle before. The one where she ended up defending her tone while everybody else avoided the actual problem. She was not doing that again. So she saved the thread and went back to the packet. If they wanted so badly, they could start with the money, the repair, and the access. Until then, she was not going to spend another minute arguing feelings with people who kept dodging facts. At work, the pressure found her in a new form. Stephanie had noticed the extra phone checks, the quick trips to the break room, and the way Kendra kept shifting her attention between dispatch and her own life. By mid-afternoon, there was an email waiting in her inbox about attendance expectations and personal disruptions. It was polite, but it wasn't. Kendra read it once and looked back at the root board. She knew what that kind of note could turn into if the house kept dragging her around. One more messy day, and somebody at work would start reading her as unreliable instead of overloaded. She could not afford that. Not with her job holding gas money, groceries, and the rides for her father. So she took the warning as information, not judgment. The house problem needed to move into the thread where everybody had to answer for it. Not because she wanted a scene, because she needed her income to stay clean. Kendra did not send one more soft reminder. She opened the full household thread and the landlord thread together, and attached everything she had been holding back. The leak photos, the payment confirmations, the contractor note, the timeline, the access windows, even the calendar blocks that showed why she could not keep reshuffling her life around everybody else's convenience. Then she typed one clear line. If anybody needed her time, her card, or records again, it would have to be in writing. No side texts, no guessing. No acting, like her work belonged to Brian just because he knew how to make it sound easy. She hit send and let the packet sit there under everybody's name at once. For the first time, the facts were not filtered through him. They were just there, plain and unavoidable, with her name on the work. After that, Brian could not be the only one telling it. Paula answered by scheduling a household and landlord conversation under a neat little subject line about communication. Concerns. Kendra stared at it because of course that was the move. Make it sound like a ton issue and hope that blurs the money, the leak, and the access problems underneath it. Brian went quiet after that, which told her he had seen the packet and did not like what it did to his version of the house. Megan still had not fully repaid the utility share either, so the numbers were sitting right there in the middle of everything. Kendra saved the invite and let it sit. She was not surprised that the official response tried to put her clarity on trial. She just had to be ready now to answer facts with facts, not get dragged back into defending her tone. The meeting was set. So was the line she would not cross. Paula started the meeting the way she always liked to start things, with a calm voice and a polished phrase. She said everybody needed to reset communication. Like the leak, the money, and the delay were all really just a misunderstanding about tone. Kendra sat at the kitchen table with her packet open in front of her. The repair timeline, utility payments, access windows, and written requests lined up in order. Brian looked like he was about to keep things smooth. Megan kept her eyes on her phone. Warren stayed back and let Paula talk. The house smelled like damp wood under the sink. And the calendar invite on Kendra's screen still said communication concerns. Which was funny in the worst way. Kendra did not jump in. She let Paula finish. Then she folded her hands over the papers and waited to answer with the only thing in the room that had stayed. Consistent the whole time, the record. Brian took the opening. He leaned back a little and said, "I'm just trying to keep this simple." Kendra's detailed messages were making everybody tense. He made it sound almost kind, like he was doing the room a favor by not making it complicated. Kendra looked at him and did not bite. She said, "Then let's keep it simple. Start with the dates. Start with the amounts. Start with who was supposed to approve the repair." That stopped the room for a second. She was not interested in how comfortable her wording had felt to him. She wanted the facts on the table. Brian could talk about tone if he wanted, but only after he could answer the actual questions. Megan stared down at her phone. Paula stopped looking helpful. Warren looked like he was realizing this was not going to be a smooth little chat. Kendra kept her voice even and asked for decisions, not feelings. Then Kendra went straight through the money trail. She named the utility draft that had hit her card, Megan's late share, and Brian asking her to cover it one more time until Friday, like it was no big deal. She showed the payment confirmations that proved her card had already carried the house gap enough times for her to stop, pretending it was an accident. This was the part nobody wanted to sit with. Her money had been the cushion. Her credit had been the backup plan. She asked for the repayment date in writing and said, plain as she could, that a future draft could not touch her account unless the shares were confirmed first. Megan had no quick apology for that. Brian had no casual line that fixed it. Once Kendra said the amount out loud, the whole thing stopped being about annoyance and became what it had always been, her paying for everyone else's delay. Paula said Brian was still the least facing contact. Kendra let her finish. Then she looked right at the thread and asked, if Brian is the least facing contact, why am I the one you keep asking for the photos? The access notes, and the contractor times, and why am I not being copied on the replies? Nobody answered fast enough. Paula had just told her to keep things concise. But Kendra had a cleaner question than anything in the thread. If the property office needed her to open the door, track the work order, and send the evidence, then pretending Brian was the only real contact was a lie. Everybody was getting to live inside. She asked for the answer in writing, not because she wanted a fight, but because she was done letting people use her labor without naming her standing. Warren shifted. Megan looked away. Brian went still. For once, the room had to hear how much of the process depended on Kendra, while still refusing to treat her like she belonged in it. Kendra clicked open the leak folder and started laying out the history in front of them. The date-stamped photos showed the wet cabinet, the drip trail, and the way the water had been spreading long before anybody wanted to call it serious. She pulled up the older texts, too. The ones where she had been giving heads up after heads up, while Brian kept acting like it was recent. Then Beverly's message came up with the repair van details. The trash day week, the cold weather, the kind of memory that only comes from actually paying attention to a block. That was the part that landed. This was not Kendra being dramatic. It was a recurring problem she had been tracking because nobody else bothered to hold on to the pattern. By the time she finished, the room had the dates, the messages, and the witness. There was no easy way left to call it a misunderstanding. Then she got to Ben's invoice note. It didn't dress anything up. It just said the date-stamped photos and the access notes showed the water path and kept him from making a wasted trip. That was the part Brian couldn't talk around. His vague description of the leak had not given anybody enough to make a real assessment, which meant Kendra's careful record was not extra at all. It was the reason the job could be done right. Kendra didn't make a speech about it. She just read the line and let it sit there. The packet had weight now, not because somebody was flattering her, but because the work itself proved she had been the one keeping the whole thing clear. Brian looked smaller sitting next to that invoice than he had all morning. Brian tried to save himself by saying he had been working and didn't realize Kendra needed things so exact. Kendra didn't even blink. She asked him, calm as anything, what date he sent the first repair note, which cabinet panel had been wet, and when he told Warren the leak had gotten worse. He scrolled his phone. He frowned at the screen. He tried to buy time with the same relaxed voice he used when he wanted people to stop asking questions. It did not help. The room was already looking at him. If he had been handling it, he should have known the basics. Instead, Kendra was the one with the dates, the photos, and the repair window written down in order. She wasn't arguing with his feelings. She was showing everybody the gap between being named on the lease and actually knowing what was happening in the house. Paula tried to pull the meeting back to tone. She said the conversation had gotten too intense. Like that was the real problem. Kendra did not take the bait. She told them exactly what had happened instead. Her card had carried the utility draft. Her work had been interrupted while she was trying to keep dispatch moving. Andre's clinic window had been squeezed because the repair kept sliding. And every day they delayed made the leak riskier and the damage worse. She said it without a lot of heat because she didn't need heat. The facts were enough. If the room wanted to call that intensity, fine, but she was not going to apologize for naming the cost. Her money, her job, her father's appointment, and her roof were all in the same pile. That was what the meeting was about. Not her tone. Her tone was only getting them to look at the numbers. Warren went quiet after he looked at the estimate. The cabinet line was worse than he had expected. And the note about the flooring made it clear this had turned into real damage, not just a wet spot under the sink. Then he looked up at Brian and asked when he got Kendra's photos and why the whole packet never made it to him sooner. Brian tried to answer in that easy tone of his. But it was already too late for easy. The cost was sitting right there on the page. Kendra did not jump in. She just let the numbers do their work. For the first time, Warren was not listening to Brian's relaxed version of the story. He was looking at delay, and delay had a price. That changed the room. Not all at once, but enough. Brian's face tightened, and the questions stopped being about Kendra's attitude. They were about what he had been hiding by leaving out the facts. Brian reached for his phone and still couldn't find the first photo date. He gave the wrong access window. Then he guessed at the utility amount and got that wrong too. The whole room could see it. Kendra had every one of those details lined up in her packet with the receipts. the screenshots, and the calendar entries right beside them. Not because she liked making things complicated. Because somebody had to keep the facts in order. Megan sat there looking embarrassed. Warren looked annoyed. Paula looked like she wanted the room to move on before the comparison got any worse. It didn't matter, the comparison was already there. Brian had the title. But Kendra had the record. And in that moment, the record was the only thing in the room that could explain what had actually happened. By then, Warren's voice had changed. He asked Kendra to walk them through the repair, the payment trail, and the access notes from her packet. Not Brian. Her. Kendra held the folder in both hands for a second before she answered. She said she would go through it, but only as the person whose records they were using. Not as extra help. Not as the one everybody handed the hard parts to and then forgot to name in the room. So she started at the beginning. When she first noticed the leak. What she sent, who replied, what got delayed, where the money moved. No rushing, no apology, just the sequence. And because she had kept it straight all along, the story finally made sense out loud. The room had to follow her now. That was the shift, not praise or pity. Just the facts in her order. Warren did not argue after that. He approved the repair in writing right there. While the room was still sitting in the truth, Paula followed with a clean correction to the thread, putting Kendra back in the loop any time her records or her schedule were needed. And Megan, who had been soft all day, finally got a real deadline for paying the rest of the utility share. No more vague promise. No more I'll get you next week. Just the date. Kendra watched all of it land without reaching for any of it herself. That was the part that mattered. The words changed because she forced them to change. The repair could move now. The money had a number and a day attached to it. And for once, the room had to deal with her in writing instead of using her in silence. After the papers were moving, Brian finally tried to make it personal. His voice dropped, and he said he should not have made Kendra sound intense. He said he did not realize how much he had been leaning on her. It might have landed better if it had come before the estimate, before the packet, before the whole room saw the gap. Kendra kept her folder closed and told him straight that an apology did not reopen her card, her calendar, her repair labor, or her trust. Not without written terms. Not after everything she had already carried for free. Brian nodded like he understood. But understanding and access were not the same thing. Kendra was done treating them like they were. She had already chosen what this cost her, and it was not going to be paid back with regret and a softer voice. Kendra waited until the room settled, then said it plain. The old arrangement could not keep going. If Brian wanted her to stay, she needed the room terms in writing with the payment split, repair rules and communication rules spelled out. If that was too much, then she wanted a clean move-out release and the deposit handled on paper, not in somebody's memory. She held the room agreement folder open so everybody could see the deposit line and the move-out date options. Brian started to answer, but Kendra kept her voice even and stayed on the facts. Megan went quiet. Warren did too. Paula stopped treating the thread like something to smooth over and started treating it like a record. Kendra was not asking for a favor anymore. She was naming the only two choices that still respected her life. By the end of the meeting, Paula sent the summary herself. Repair approved. Utility repayment due. Direct communication required anytime Kendra's records or schedule were part of the job. Housing terms still pending. It was all there in black and white now, which was the only way it ever should have been. Brian's apology sat off to the side of it, separate from the decisions. Separate from Kendra's access. Separate from what she was willing to keep carrying. The kitchen felt different once the towel was finally off the floor and the paperwork was settled. Not perfect, just real. Kendra had her answer, and it was not built on begging or being grateful for scraps. The record had changed because she finally put the facts where nobody could duck them. And whatever happened next, it was going to happen on ground she had chosen, not on the old habit of letting other people call her help. By the next morning, Ben's repair truck was sitting out front under Warren's written approval. Kendra saw the work order update come through and noticed what was missing. Nobody was asking her to rearrange her, shift, open the house, or babysit the whole process. The contractor got under the sink, had the access he needed, and Kendra kept moving toward her own workday instead of losing it to the leak again. That alone felt different. The repair was finally being handled through the right channels. Not through her unpaid availability. She was copied on every update. Which meant she could stay informed without becoming the manager of everybody else's convenience. Brian had to watch the job go forward without Kendra saving him from it. That was the part that mattered. The house was changing, one practical step at a time. When Megan's transfer finally hit, Kendra didn't make a big thing out of it. She checked the amount, saw it matched the utility share, and then changed the rules around her card in writing. No more shared drafts unless the money was in first, and she agreed to it first. No more surprise poll and apology later. Brian got the message too. Which was fine. He could sit with the fact that convenience had been costing her real money. Kendra wasn't trying to punish anybody. She was closing the door that had kept turning her into the household cushion. The relief wasn't just getting paid back. It was knowing the same gap couldn't open again unless she let it. At dispatch, Kendra kept the house thread muted until break. Stephanie glanced over and gave her the usual warning about leaving home at home. But Kendra didn't bite. She kept her eyes on the route board and handled the complicated route change the same way she always did. Calm voice. Clean notes, no missed pickup. LaToya caught her between calls and could see the difference right away. Kendra wasn't chasing the kitchen leak or the group chat while she worked anymore. The problem still existed, but it was no longer running her shift. By the time she clocked out, her attendance log was clean. Her routes were handled, and her paycheck was still protected from the chaos she had stopped letting spill over. Kendra got to Andre's senior apartment with the pharmacy bag in one hand and the grocery receipt folded in the other. And for once she wasn't rushing off some house problem. No leak, no landlord message, no roommate text trying to turn her into the fixer again. Andre was at the kitchen counter when she came in. And he looked at her twice before he said, "You sound different." Kendra set the bag down and asked, "Different how?" He said, "Less like you're carrying everybody." That made her pause. Because he was right. When he asked if things at the house were settled, she told him she was handling it and left it there. She didn't turn him into the place where she had to spill all her stress. She checked the folded clinic papers, set the bus schedule magnet back on his fridge, and stayed long enough to sit, eat, and be there with him without apology. Paula sent the options in writing, one set of room terms if Kendra stayed, or a clean move-out release if she didn't. Kendra read both, then looked over the other room contact Beverly had given her and started asking her own questions. What was the rent? What counted as utilities? Who handled repairs? Who got called when something broke? She wasn't signing the first thing that looked calm just because it was calm. Not anymore. For once, shelter was not being presented as a favor she had to earn by staying useful. It was a decision with paper in front of her and real terms attached. Kendra sat with that for a minute, then saved Beverly's number and kept reading. No panic, no rushing. Just choices she could actually compare. Kendra read both options one more time before she answered. One kept her tied to Brian's household dynamic, just with cleaner wording. The other was the clean release. Deposit handled in writing. Move out dated, no more pretending the old setup was fair. She looked up and said, "I'll take the release." That was all. Paula wrote it down. Warren signed where he had to. Kendra also signed the new room agreement for the nearby place. The one with rent, utilities, and repair rules spelled out so nobody could get slippery later. Kendra let the moment stay simple. Kendra left the table with papers that meant something. Not a victory lap, just solid ground. The kind she could actually stand on. Kendra did not soften the message. She sent it in writing so nobody could pretend they had misunderstood her. After the agreed date, she would handle her own move out and nothing else. No spreadsheet updates. No covering drafts on her card. No repair calls. No reminder texts about what was due or who had dropped the ball. Brian and Megan could be upset if they wanted. They could read it again if they needed to. The point was that she was done being the person who kept the whole house running for free while they called it teamwork. Her checklist was her checklist. Her key return date was theirs to deal with. And the house thread, the one that had lived on her memory for months, was no longer open for her to keep feeding. Once Kendra stepped back, the house had to carry its own weight. Brian was the one checking the rent portal now. Brian was the one following up on the repair. Megan had to watch her own payment deadlines instead of waiting for Kendra to ping her first. Warren and Paula stopped sending the whole thing through Kendra and started dealing with each other directly on the record. It wasn't dramatic, and that was part of the point. Nobody was falling apart. They were just finally doing the work they had been leaning on her for. The place got quieter, but it also got less smooth. Kendra let it stay that way. She had already spent enough time making other people's comfort look easy. LaToya helped with a ride for a few boxes, nothing fancy. Just enough so Kendra didn't have to keep wearing herself down to get it done. Beverly stood by the curb and watched the move with that sharp, steady look of hers, like she was keeping track of every box and every promise. Kendra kept checking things off her own list as she went. Deposit confirmation, work schedule, Andre's next appointment, grocery tote, tape roll, new key on a plane ring. Nobody was taking over. Nobody was telling her what should matter most. They were helping where help actually helped. And then stepping back, that was the difference. Kendra stayed the one making the choices. The one holding the papers, the one deciding what got packed and what stayed behind. She moved like someone who finally had room to breathe. In her new room, Kendra set her phone down and updated the calendar the way she liked it. Clean and exact. Work, Andre's clinic ride, groceries, her own rest. The old house thread stayed muted. Her repair folder stayed archived. Not because she needed to forget it, but because she didn't need it open in front of her anymore. The lamp was on beside a made bed, and the quiet felt earned. The same mind that had kept everybody else's schedule from falling apart was still there. But now it belonged to her life. She wasn't waiting for Brian to admit what she had carried. She wasn't waiting for Megan to apologize better. She wasn't waiting for anybody to make the next part simple. She had put her life back in her own hands, piece by piece, and now it felt like hers again. And for the first time in a long time, that was enough. I kept thinking about this one after reading it. It had that long email feeling where you think you're done, and then it stays with you. What gets me is how normal it felt that the utility charge could hit her card. The contractor could need her dates, and the whole repair record could sit on her time until the house needed it. That is the part that still bothers me. She had to stop covering the charges, the reminders, and the repair record before anybody gave her equal standing. If you have ever been the one tracking the rent date, the utility charge, or the repair reminders for everyone else in the house, say what made you stop being the default person.